We're going to jump up to 1970 when we're well into the excitement of analog synthesis in the glory days. And there's a gentleman by the name of Alan Pearlman who was actually inspired by hearing Switched on Bach. The amazing Carlos Opus and best-selling record of 1968, and he was so amazed by it, he said, wow, I got to make a synth. And so he decided to go into the synth biz, and he started his company out first with a product called the ARP 2500, which is also a great synth, but it was a lot more expensive, a lot more complex. And then when he came out with the ARP 2600, he had a synth that made patching much easier. It was more rugged, more reliable. Sounded great, just like the 2500 did, but it was a lot easier to use. And this synth caught on like wildfire. Why? Because it sounded great, it was easy to use, and was built very well, and it stayed in tune, which is always a nice thing. So he came out with the ARP 2600, and of course ARP as a company took off from there. They created other products later, and interestingly enough, the thing that was magic about the ARP 2600, it was perfect for schools. And every school that wanted to have an electronic music program anytime during the 70s, and even now many of them, still have their ARP 2600 synthesizers, or possibly clones of the ARP 2600 synthesizer. And it didn't help that there were certain users, such as Pete Townsend, who looks like he's getting into performance here, and Edgar Winter, who loved the idea of the ARP sound and used it in countless records, along with other artists as well. And later on, long after the ARP company had shut down, Alan Pearlman worked with WayOutWare, with James Heintz of WayOutWare, to create a software version. And Alan was just amazed by it. And today we are lucky enough to, Alan's not here. He turns 90 years old next month. He doesn't travel. And I talked to Alan last week. He is excited about receiving this. And James said that he would offer to take care of getting the award to Alan Pearlman. And so James, you're hiding in the back row? Oh, he's hiding in the front row. Okay. Okay. He's also come up here. He's also bring up a certain mystery guest, the noted synthesis composer and amazing guy of all time, Mr. Patrick Gleeson.
Hi, good to be here. I just want to take you back for a moment to 1970. I had a little studio in the Mission District in San Francisco called Different Fur, and was in the process of learning to become a musician. And I was doing it with sort of on-the-job training. I was doing little synthesizer projects for rock groups and so forth. And then I heard that David Rubinson, a well-known producer, was going to take over the production tasks for Herbie Hancock. Well, at night in my studio, I'd been putting Miles Davis tracks on my new 16 track and then overdubbing synthesizer tracks, just abstract stuff. And God, it sounded great to me. So I called David. I had done some work with some of his rock groups, and I said, you know, I can do this. Well, David said, very reasonably to Herbie, as I found out later, he said, you know, this guy's not really a musician, but he can program the instruments, so go over to his studio and he'll set it up for you. Herbie, being the kind of guy he is, extremely open, it doesn't matter who you are, if you've got something that's musical, he loves you. So Herbie responded to what I was doing, short story. 3 days later, we had overdubbed all of the Crossings, which was sort of the prototypical jazz synth album. 2 months later, I'd done all this, by the way, on my Moog 3 synthesizer, which is several cases of cabinets, and it's rather, as someone delicately approached, didn't quite reveal, has a little trouble staying in tune, and tends to fall apart when handled by an abused and angry roadie. So a couple of months later, I got a call from David, and he said, you know, Herbie's here, wants to talk to you. I think, great. When can you come with us? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, we're going out on the road. We're starting a tour. When can you come? I said, well, how soon are you going? He said, well, we're going in about a week. Now, I had never played live in a band, in a bar band, in a neighborhood band, in any band. And I was going to play with 6 other guys who were, you know, all masters of the jazz tradition. And I thought, Lord, what am I going to do? I mean, I can't take the Moog out. The only thing I could think of was Don Buchla might have something. So I called Don Buchla, and I said, this is what I want to do, and if you got something I can use. Don said, well, what kind of a keyboard are you going to use? And for those of you who know Don, you'll know that I sank my ship, and I said, well, you know, a piano keyboard. He said, no, not interested, hung up. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? Somebody said, well, there's this new machine I saw called an ARP 2600. If it hadn't been for the ARP 2600, I would be a retired insurance salesman, because it would have been impossible to do what I was doing with Herbie, an improvising jazz group, no patch memory, get out there, guys are doing it. Every tune is different every moment, and you have to, some way, patch this stuff together and make some plausible sound while you're doing it. Could not have been done with any other instrument. Not another synthesizer in the world would have done this. As has been said, it was so logically laid out, you really couldn't miss. If you just kept in mind, you know, the big picture, we're starting with oscillators here, and we have an amplifier over here, and there's filters and other stuff in between. You could make music in real time without patch memory, which is an amazing achievement. And that's all I have to say about this, other than to say that I love WayOutWare's Time Warp 2600. I endorsed it many years ago and still use it in the studio every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. Kind words. I've got another couple little things to read here. I reached out to another famous user of the ARP 2600 and got a response from Pete Townsend of The Who. Pete Townsend says, I didn't meet Alan. The guy who looked after me in the UK was called David Friend, and the art guys were all great. My A&R consultant was the musician Roger Powell, who I think went on to work with Todd Rundgren's band before making great music of his own. We had many brainstorming sessions that I recall, and we had fun. There were two compact analog synthesizers that came across in close succession, the EMS Putney, made in the UK, and the ARP 2600. They were both similar but different. But they both were had the most wonderful manuals that began explaining how sound was created and how it could be manipulated and how it could be then reproduced. It was pure audio physics for the layman, and I was very grateful for the work and the generosity that went into both books. Most electronic musicians want to keep their secrets, or so it seemed. Each manual had suggested patches, but unlike those on the digital keyboards of today, they were all adjusted with physical controls and couldn't be recalled except on paper. So every time you set one up, you got a slightly different sound. On the ARP 2600, I used one of the suggested patches to mangle the sound of my electric guitar into the main spine on Who Are You? It was a huge sound, hard to believe it came out of a little suitcase. Earlier, I had used the EMS for the spine on Won't Get Fooled Again. So these two compact synths were breakthroughs for me, creating the basis of my synth education, as well as helping me to make great new sounding music. I just got my old ARP 2600 and my larger 2500 back from the specialist restorer Phil Sirocco at Discrete Synthesizers, and he did such a great job, tears filled my eyes. ARP made beautiful looking machines in the 2500 and the 2600, but the 2600 is rugged and purposeful. Jim Heintz, who is standing in for the great Alan Pearlman, today has made great software emulation of the 2600, so the past has been hauled into the present. Pity we can't do that with Alan. So, anyhow, that's Pete Townsend. The manual was written by a man named Jim Mitchmerheisen, who worked closely with Alan back in the early days of the ARP 2600, and I was lucky enough to be able to get Jim Mitchmerheisen to write the manual for my Time Warp 2600, and that's how I also got in touch with Alan. Jim wrote some nice little things here. He says, actually, when I took up work on the ARP 2600 owner's manual late 1970, the company was named Tonus from Alan's physical fitness vocabulary. Alan was an avid runner at the time and introduced running to David Friend, as it turned out, and David's still an avid runner. The release of Switched on Bach 2 years earlier had kindled my interest in audio synthesis, and I conned my way into some experience with a VCS-3 Putney, and had begun to hear news of the ARP 2500 from a startup in Boston. I introduced myself to their people at the Fall NAMM show in New York, where they showed me a prototype of what was eventually the 2600, made a few suggestions about the design, and Alan invited me to write the owner's manual for the product. I moved to Boston in December of 1970 to do so. I finished the manual in early 1971 and continued a relationship with the company for some time. Alan shared an interest in Bach and in using the English language precisely. He reviewed every page of the owner's manual I completed, and we battled sometimes over word choices. Usually the issues lay in choosing between technical precision and colloquial easy talk. As I recall, the outcomes were pretty much 50-50 between the two of us, and he sharpened the language while I smoothed the corners. After Alan and I played Bach for each other at his home in Newton, he funded several recording studio sessions for me, and I did some tracks of the Bartok Romanian folk dances and the French Suite No. 5 of J.S. Bach for our promotional releases. From 1972 to 1978, I was grateful for Alan supporting the years of the Boston School of Electronic Music. He forwarded inquiries about learning synthesis to the school. And that's how the Boston School of Electronic Music eventually ended up enrolling eminent Israeli composer Tzvi Avni in 1974, and other musicians that he sent our way were Chick Corea and Stevie Wonder. But anyhow, the ARP 2600, I discovered it in a junior college in Santa Barbara. They had one in an electronic music course, and I was about 18 or so. And for about 20 years, I carried around memories of that 2600, and I couldn't find one. So I decided, well, the time has come. I've got to build one. And so I began creating the Time Warp 2600. I had a lot of experience. I've been a musician my whole life, and had a lot of experience with synthesizers and digital equipment. I used to repair synthesizers in Studio City for Deemer amps and keyboards. But I learned what the sound of a synthesizer should be. And so when I went to craft Time Warp 2600, I wasn't happy until it sounded exactly like an ARP 2600 in all aspects, including audio rate modulation and phase variations and all the ranges of all the sliders and the characteristics of the filter, and the end results I'm proud of, and Alan is too, because that's why I'm standing here. So anyhow. Thank you very much for the award, and I'm going to make sure that Alan receives it personally, delivered by none other than Jennifer Haruska, who lives in Boston, as soon as we can. Oh, one other thing I'd like to show real quick, just for a second. Here's a 1971 vintage ARP 2600 advertisement.
Oh, wow.
at the NAMM show.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So where can people buy WayOutWare?
Oh, it's available through...
The plug.
Oh, sorry. Yes, the TimeWarp 2600 has just been re-updated. We now support all the 64-bit hosts in addition to the 32-bit hosts. And it's being distributed by InMusic brands, Sonovox, and it's going to be available in the new Akai Advanced keyboard. I was also... I haven't stopped programming. I'm doing a lot of work on brand new products in the music industry. And this year, I'm very proud of the Akai Advanced keyboard that I was a big part of. So thank you so much.
Thank you. This is a NAMM show. We had to get a commercial
That's right.
plug. It's been well deserved, you know, for a product that's actually approved by both Alan Pearlman as well as so many artists such as the legendary Patrick Gleeson.
No,